for week one?
Well, one of the things that we talk about Philadelphia and the reason why we think they're the best team is not just based on scheme, how they're going to go after people, but it's based on the amount of depth that they have at key positions. We saw last year defense, linebackers. We saw offensive line, key left tackle. We saw quarterback. We saw running backs out of the backfield, Sproles. We saw so many people get injured for them. So that's the reason why Howie Roseman and his staff there have done a tremendous job. Now, does it affect when the starter comes back? It might affect it, but I thought Carson Wentz was going to be ready week number 1, but I believe it's going to affect the reps in practice more so now because Carson Wentz hadn't done a lot of 11-on-11, and Nick Foles has been taking those reps. So now does Carson Wentz, because you only have 2 weeks left until the regular season, do you start getting him into 11-11? I think that's where the adjustment comes from a practice time. But I believe Carson Wentz will be the starter week number 1.
It wouldn't bother me at all if they adjust practice time. And if you're right, C, that it was always the plan for Wentz to start week 1, I know that was their hope. But that if that was the timeline before this injury, then great. But I would not allow this injury to affect. I wouldn't make it rush. I wouldn't rush Carson Wentz because of this. Like, he's too important.
Well, whatever the medical staff, whatever prescription that they've given, they're not going to deviate from that. So it's not as if something happened in the game, and then now they're going to meet with Carson and be like, you know something, Carson, we're going to speed up your recovery. I believe that he was out there the first day of training camp. All right? There is no way that he shouldn't be there for the first game of the regular season given that injury unless he has some type of setback that we haven't heard anything about.
So why would they pull him then from those 11-11? Like, why did they sort of slow him down?
Because there's more bodies around the quarterback's legs. It's easier for him to get hurt. The center gets jammed up coming back out of center. Someone falls on his knees. So it's a precautionary measure because that is where he's more at risk compared to 7-on-7 where you have someone snapping the ball or you have him in shotgun. So the risk is minimal there in the 7-on-7 and in the individual work compared to in the teamwork.
So, but the point that you were making there, that whatever the team doctors' their prognosis was, the schedule was, that they won't deviate from it. That's to me the key thing here, because what you can't do is, and I understand, I get if you're an Eagles fan, you're like, man, we were 13-3 last year. Had we been 12-4. We're not Super Bowl champs, most likely, because they'd been 12-4. They don't have home field advantage. They are on the road against Minnesota instead of Minnesota coming there. The whole world is different. And how many times on this show already have we talked about the depth of the NFC? That what you do in week 1 against Atlanta absolutely could be the difference between getting a bye and not getting a bye. I understand the importance of that opening week game, but nothing's more important than the overall health and trajectory of number 11, who is, you could argue right now, it would be the number 1 pick. If every player was available, new league, who's your number 1 overall pick to start a franchise? It might be Carson Wentz. So you have to be uber cautious with him. C's point that they are being incredibly cautious and still planning to play him week 1, assuming that's the case, then I don't think this injury affects them drastically except for week 3 preseason reps, which Nate Sudfeld who played pretty well yesterday actually, who might get more of an opportunity to show the league what he can do.
Are either of you concerned with how Nick Foles played yesterday? It seemed like timing was a little off. He was a little rusty. Were you expecting a little bit more from what you saw, or was it too small a sample size?
No, I know who Nick Foles is. I know what happened in the NFC Championship game with Minnesota. He caught fire, and that continued into the Super Bowl. I don't have starter expectations for Nick Foles. So, no, I'm not surprised at all. Based on what they were trying to do offensively, they got a little seepage in the offensive line, so he got some pressure. All quarterbacks, when they get pressure, are not as good, but it's not as if I expect Nick Foles to light it up. Like, we know what Nick Foles' limitations are, and just because you're Super Bowl MVP, I'm not changing that. That's who Nick Foles is. He's going to be inconsistent, and that's what we saw last night.
This type of hit you see relatively often in NFL games where the guy comes off the blind side, quarterback is getting ready to throw, and it's always shocking to me as a guy that didn't play that whenever that happens, my arm's going forward and a monster pulls it backwards, that you don't have this type of result where the quarterback is knocked out of the game. It's shocking to me we don't have more injuries like this. Now, the Eagles were very cagey about what the actual prognosis is. Sore shoulder. Like, was it a subluxation? Was it a dislocation? Was it simply just a strain? We won't know that until later today or tomorrow.
Yeah, but I think if it was more severe than that, I think that they would have led on to that. And I think the NFL would not allow that to happen, especially if his shoulder came out of joint. I think we would know that. I think that there is some type of muscle strain, and it's not more significant than that.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.